Today, we are continuing on our journey of Shabbos. I know we've had some off weeks, but today we're continuing on our journey of learning about Shabbos. And Shabbos, of course,
16th of Kislev, what's the date?
Today is, I think, the 17th of Kislev, right? Let's check that. Confirm that. So, today's the 17th of Kislev. And we want to thank, by the way, Miriam Kishanian. These books were lovely, dedicated by her in honor of her father's Neshama. May it have an Aliyah, Raj Gob and Batya. So Shabbos, just to go make sure we're all on the same page. The laws of Shabbos, of course, is the seventh day. Hashem rested on the seventh day. And he said, therefore, we should rest on the seventh day. Well, how do we define rest? We said rest is defined by creative work. Creative work means changing something from one either one look to another look, but not so much look, from one form to another form identity to a newer or changed identity. That is considered creative work, not just work, rather creative work. Today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about physical work as well that the rabbis didn't want you to do, but that is a rabbinic ruling, not a biblical ruling. We're going to talk about that. It's very famous. It's called Muktzeh. We're also going to talk about candle lighting today. Okay, so we're opening here on page 41, and we're going to learn. Okay, what I like about this book is it's simple, it's easy, but it's obviously complicated at the same time, which all good books. Okay, so electricity on Shabbos. Is there a problem with electricity on Shabbos? Now, electricity, nowhere in the Torah does it say you shall not use electricity in the Torah. It doesn't say that, of course, because for two reasons. A, the laws of Shabbos are only hinted to in the Torah. It says whatever had to be done in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, to build the tabernacle, we can't do. And then the rabbis deduced that there's 39 different prohibitions of different categories of work called the 39 malachas. Point one and point two is there wasn't electricity in the days of the Mishkan. This is going back 300 years ago. Okay. So what's the rule of electricity in Shabbos? So like everything in the Torah, and this is an interesting fact, the Torah is all inclusive. Everything is included in the Torah. There's nothing in the world that is not included in the Torah. There's nothing in the world, no human experience, no existence in the world that is not included in the Torah. How come? Well, because God made the world. Hashem made the world. Hashem made the world. How did he make the world? He used the Torah to make the world, and he used the letters of the Hebrew alphabet to make the world. And in the words of this Kabbalah, or in the Medrash, Istaka by Raisa, he looked in the Torah, who bara Alma, and created the world. So that means that everything in this world must be included in the Torah. It's an impossibility otherwise. Okay, and that means every scenario that will ever come up in any one of our lives is talked about in the Torah. Now, it may not be in black and white. We might have to find the answer, but it's there. This is such a beautiful lesson and point to remember that any experience and existence that is in this world is talked about in the Torah, and the Torah says, here's what you need to do. Now, those of us who are more lucky or who have, might know how Torah applies to everything, or we study more, or we have, hopefully, someone we could ask. That's one of the great things. Let's say we were Shabbos by the Rebbe, Grand Heights, one thing great about a Rebbe is they could show you Torah's guidance in every scenario. So now let's apply that concept here. When it came to the laws of Shabbos, something new came to the world called electricity, light bulbs, Thomas Edison. Now the Rebbe said, okay, what is electricity? Is it allowed on Shabbos or not? Maybe it is. I don't know. What is electricity? So I'm not an electrician, although my cousin is, but I'm still not an electrician. But we know what would be a potential issue of using electric on Shabbos with the knowledge that we might have till now, or any knowledge you have about Shabbos, right? I mean, let's ask the basic question. The rule against working on Shabbos is creative work. Would we assume that using electricity is creative work or not? Let's define the question that way. Nobody has an opinion?
Well, I have an
Isn't the
opinion.
issue
Okay.
it's like a spark and that's like starting a fire?
Okay, so one,
Two.
there's a clear prohibition of Torah, very good. It says, actually written in black and white. Most of the prohibitions of Shabbos are alluded to through what we do with the work of the Mishkan. However, the Torah clearly says, "Lo yisavaru eish," you cannot kindle a fire. So if we define electricity as fire, which most people do, then because there's a spark or a circuit, which is right, so then it would be a prohibition of fire. Yeah.
But creative work implies doing something. So if the lights are already on, you're using electricity, but you're not like being the cause of it. So
we said this before in an earlier
oh,
class,
sorry.
which no, it's good. Good question, because then we get it reiterated. Thank you. Which is what happens before Shabbos is generally fine. We don't mind if you turn on a fire before Shabbos, it's allowed to stay on Shabbos. In fact, for the next thing we're going to learn about today is lighting Shabbos candles, right? Now you can't light a candle on Shabbos, but we have a mitzvah to light a candle before Shabbos, which is stay on Shabbos. So yes, according to all opinions, if the electric circuit was turned on before Shabbos, it could stay on Shabbos. But what about turning on or creating an electric circuit? So some electricity, most people learn is fire. For sure, you've changed something. You've done creative work. You've closed the circuit. I think someone said you closed the circuit, right? In other words, fact of the matter is, before you trigger that electric circuit to be right, there was one status, and now through your creative work, very easy work, but creative work by turning that switch, it's very easy, where you created a change that now triggered that the light should go on or the thermostat or whatever it is, right? But at the core, you've created something. You've completed a circuit. One of the prohibitions on the 39 prohibitions is you can't do the final blow. In other words, in old times, it was like right as you were about to finish, let's say chiseling something or maybe hammering a nail or a blacksmith or a silversmith. So there's that final blow, and now it's done. It's complete. Can't do that on Shabbos because that's creative work. You've taken something and now you've made it finished. Can't do that on Shabbos. So completing a circuit would be basically, according to everyone, electricity is creative work. Not necessarily hard work. That's not the definition of the issue of Shabbos, but rather creative work. Electricity, therefore, is creative work. Okay. Now, any questions on that point, by the way? Because that's
Yeah, I have an interesting question.
Please.
So by this logic, if you leave your car on before Shabbat, could you drive then? On
very good.
Shabbat?
Good question. An example. So let's go through some electrical issues, and let's use our brains together and see what we could come out with. Okay. So again, creating an electric change or a circuit is an issue. Okay. And therefore, turning on a light, just a simple example, is an issue. Now, you say, okay, I don't turn on the light. I won't turn on the TV. Don't turn on the TV. It's electric. What about opening the fridge, which has a little piece where the light triggers on when I open the fridge? That would be a problem. So you have to either have Shabbos mode on your fridge, or you have to cover the switch so that the light shouldn't trigger on, because then you've intentionally, although maybe that wasn't your intent, triggered that the light should go on Shabbos. Okay? Or plugging an appliance in on Shabbos, turning on an appliance. This is anything that's electric. Using a phone. What's the issue of using a phone? Now, you might say, hang on. The phone, what happens if I leave the phone on Shabbos? Could I use the phone on? That was essentially your question, in other words.
With the car, could you do it?
Right. Okay, good. Or the car. By the way, a car is more complicated than electric, because a car is gas, and you're actually creating much more of a fire to turn on a car, if I understand correctly. But let's say an electric car, let's say the car's on. Okay. So it's not only if you've initiated a circuit. If you can't only not start a fire on Shabbos, you can't feed fuel to the fire on Shabbos either, right? You can't put a log into the fire on Shabbos. You can't do anything that will to continue working on Shabbos. So if you turn on the car and the car is working, in theory, and you're sitting, right? Okay, car's on. But now, when you open the door, you're triggering sensors. Closing the door, you're triggering sensors. Now, when you're driving the car, you're making electricity work. You're changing, I don't know exactly what's happening, but you're changing circuits or something every time you're right. Just like if you change the channel would be a problem. You're creating some sort of electric signal. And when you're driving your car, you're creating signals. You're changing something. I don't know exactly what, but okay, good question. But the answer is maybe it's an issue of muktzeh, it's not an issue of electricity. So if it's okay, wait, you don't mean adjust the knob. You mean, let's say, pull the button up and down so it should swivel or not.
The direction.
Right, the swivel. We will, that's the issue of muktzeh. Till now, the answer would be yes, but we're gonna learn about muktzeh today and we'll answer that question. Okay.
I have a good look.
What about with the TV? If you leave it on, same channel, same VOD, no touch.
Could you leave a TV on Shabbos? The answer is halachically yes, but it's not in the spirit of Shabbos, therefore you shouldn't. That's the most I can't tell you unequivocally no. During wars, they tell everyone leave your radio on, or in Israel, lahavdil, but during very critical subway series between the Yankees and the Mets, many people have left them on. No comparison between a war, but maybe it is a war, unknown, right? So why? Because halachically, you're doing nothing. You didn't do anything, but it's not the spirit of Shabbos. I want to say that clear. It's not the spirit of Shabbos. If someone says, I need to leave it on for some reason, versus would we say leave it on versus turn it on? Absolutely, because turning it on is a prohibition of Shabbos. Leaving it on is not the spirit of Shabbos. But if someone left it, look, if someone's walking by, and they see a screen playing and they watch it for a few minutes, it didn't desecrate Shabbos, but it's not the spirit of Shabbos. They didn't. Now, because of that, and this came up this week because we were in Crown Heights, someone was running late to Crown Heights, one of our friends, right? And he was on the train. Subway, very good. So, could you be on a subway on Shabbos?
Some people do it.
So, to get into the subway, you have to swipe. You can't swipe in, right? First of all, it's an issue of purchasing, buying. You're not allowed to do transactions, business transactions. Shabbos, that's a business transaction that wasn't allowed. But what happens if you're already on the and you have right? But and it was electric. You triggered the electric turnstile. Okay. What happens if you're already on the train? So the truth is like this: if you're already on the train, it's most halachic opinions say, especially if it's the issue of safety, or you need to, let's say you're going to get out on Shabbos, you're going to be in some neighborhood that's not safe, or not. Stay on the train till the exit that you need to go and get off the train. Now you should apply to do this. And you can't get on the train on Shabbos, again, because you can't go to the turnstile, or you jump the turnstile, no, whatever. But, right, you can't do that, of course.
Well,
I'm saying from a Shabbos issue.
It's going to be like a free. It's going to be a free.
But
Shabbos.
Either way, it's not. So the rabbis didn't want you to go on a train on Shabbos. I'm saying clearly it was a rabbinic thing. They said because the train rattles, it's not comfortable. They were just trying to say we don't really want people on trains on Shabbos. But if someone's already on the train on Shabbos, and it's safe for them to stay on the train and get off, stay on the train till you're stopped and then get off. That would be the halachically allowed thing to do in that case. I wouldn't plan that from the get-go. Why? Because you're not triggering really anything. Your weight is really making no difference to the train. You're not creating a spark. Now, let's talk about, though, what about an elevator? Okay. An elevator has a big issue. First of all, the biggest issue of an elevator is who's pressing the button to get you to your designated floor. Fine. So let's say there's such a thing called a Shabbos elevator.
A Shabbos goy.
Okay, we're going to talk about that later. You can't really ask a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbos.
What if you're doing
even though Al Gore said he was Joe Lieberman's Shabbos guy, right, when they were running together. But really, you can't ask a non-Jew to do something for you. There are a few exceptions that you could. It's a very not clear. People have a lot of confusion. We weren't going to talk about it today, so I'm not. But essentially, you can't really ask a non-Jew to press the elevator button for you. You cannot. That would not be allowed. However, what if you have a Shabbos elevator? What's a Shabbos? And by the way, because we're going to talk about it in the laws of Muktzeh, so I'm going to say it now. When it comes to electricity, this idea that I'm not going to do it with my finger, I'm going to do it with my elbow, my back, my foot, it's absolutely ludicrous, made up, doesn't apply. It's just as doing with your finger. It's not. There's no difference between your finger and your elbow and your back and your pinky and your long stick. It's all the same. The reason why people have this mistaken notion is, as we're going to see later, in the laws of Muktzeh, there actually is a difference. Okay, but not in the laws of electric. It doesn't apply there. Okay, so if someone knocks the elevator button with their elbow, you say, hey, whatever you're doing, you just did it with your finger. Right? It doesn't change because you use your elbow. It's the same thing. Right? The only time it's going to be different is when the laws of Muktzeh, as we'll see later today, that's where the change will be. Okay, so an elevator, but let's say you have a Shabbos elevator. Okay, what's a Shabbos elevator? So let's say at the hospitals they have a Shabbos elevator. I know it's Mount Sinai, they have a hospital elevator. Pretty sure at Cornell they do too. It means that the elevator automatically stops on every floor. So now I don't have to push it. could I ride a Shabbos elevator? So there's many rabbis that say you can, or else a Shabbos elevator wouldn't be in existence. Some say you can't. Why not? Because even though you're not pressing the button, you are making the elevator work harder, which essentially you're creating more electric usage by going on the elevator because you weigh something, right? Especially me, I weigh a lot, right? So the elevator has to work more to move my body. So I'm creating more electric output or more electric sparks. I don't know how the terminology, right? We're gonna have to ask an electrician. It's being created by me being on the elevator. So therefore, I can't go on the elevator. Okay. What about being on a boat on Shabbos?
Oh,
Halachically, you could be on a boat on Shabbos because the boat is so big and the boat doesn't need electric. We have electric boats.
halachically, you can be on a boat.
You could be on a
Shabbos.
cruise ship on Shabbos.
What about Barry Armet's boat?
Okay, so the thing is, according to halacha, you're supposed to board the boat by Wednesday. So I don't know what type of boat Barry Armet has, so I can't comment. Tell you what, because this goes back to what we said about the train. Because there's seasickness, people get motion sickness, and therefore they don't want that you should board the boat Friday and the whole Shabbos you're gonna be sick. So they said you can't board the boat on Friday, but if you board it by Wednesday, which means by Shabbos, you're already used to the sea, so then you can have a nice, enjoyable Shabbos, and that's allowed. That's what the idea that they didn't want you on a train because it rattles. They took it from a boat.
You can't get on a moving boat on Shabbos.
No,
No ferries.
no. There's another reason why you can't go on a boat, board a boat on Shabbos.
Live in the air.
Very good. There's something, an issue called Tchum Shabbos, the boundaries of. There's the boundaries of Shabbos.
Okay.
The boundary of Shabbos is, and we're even, okay, the boundary of Shabbos, I was going to mention it, a person is not allowed to go 3,000 feet outside the city limits. Now, once a boat leaves dock, right, that the dock was city limits. Once it goes 3,000 feet, you've left the city limits. You're not allowed to do that. And therefore, if you're on a cruise on Shabbos and the cruise docks on Shabbos, you cannot get on and off the boat. This is important. Who was telling me in the community they were recently on a boat? Yeah, there you go. So no, someone was just telling me about how they go on cruises. Oh, Esther from the Chabad office. How amazing cruises are. But you just have to know that you can't go off the boat on Shabbos because if it docks on Shabbos, you came into the city limits on Shabbos. You can't move then within the city limits on Shabbos, and you can't board the boat back. And if the boat leaves the dock on Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to board that boat. So therefore, you could go on a cruise on Shabbos, board preferably by Wednesday. Some people say nowadays you can even board by Thursday because it's you get comfortable with boats quicker nowadays. But you would want to, you can't go off and dock on and off shops. Okay. Other electric issues. Yeah.
So the issue on Friday was getting off of one train and then having to get onto another. So did you say that that's like, since you're already in there and it doesn't matter whether they open the door, it's not affecting anything, or does it actually matter because you're already getting off one and transferring to another one?
It's probably a little bit worse to move to another one, but again, if there was any danger, get on the second train. Once you're ready through the turnstile.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Electric has a lot of rules, but I think we said the principle of what the issue of electric, and therefore prepare your house. When talking in terms of prepare your house, you want to prepare it with the electric that needs to be on should be on before Shabbos. And the lights that you want on should be on. The lights you want off should be off, etc. Any electric related questions? It could be anything electric related. Okay. Seems like you're bothered by something. No, you should be bothered by something. No.
Well, I guess with the train, like how much do you have to affect it before you can't be on it? Like what if, obviously there's no scenario where you're gonna be, but like, let's say with making dairy meat or something, 1/60th. So how much electricity, because you are affecting it from a physics standpoint, being on the train, even though it's very insignificant, it's something.
Question is, and this I don't know, but it seems like the train is not creating more output till it probably has like a certain threshold till it creates more output. You're saying obviously every little addition is going to eventually cause it, but maybe there's like a baseline threshold that it's going to automatically have to pull that you're not changing that at all. It's like the initial fare of the taxi, that includes a certain amount. I don't know.
If you're affecting it beforehand, that it's almost like you're grandfathered in. It's like,
Well,
you know,
then
whatever it is you're affecting, you're not changing it.
That's interesting. That's
You're
interesting.
not changing it, so therefore it's grandfathered
Right,
in.
but then maybe.
What's manual?
The trains are manual, so the guy in the front, that
Could be
totally
interesting.
power. I've been on a train where you're just like jogging back and forth, flying on track, and then you get another one that's like crawling by. Cause some guy had, but he doesn't care what's behind him, he's like, I wanna go fast. Just goes on.
Okay. So, and I don't, yeah.
That had
Seems like
nothing
by
to do-
train, if they really said you're basically doing nothing. That's the truth. Okay,
So what about a bus?
a bus it seems like you're just making much more of a difference on a bus. It's smaller to his question.
What about an
Yeah.
airplane?
The 16
No.
You can't, okay, if you're already on the plane on Shabbos, you can't get off.
Like, what if you're airborne and you're
You mean like
flight
if it's
isolated,
like
you're
a
circling for
42
So
hour
it's a
flight?
big problem. If you land on Shabbos,
And
there's
it's
nothing,
not, assuming it's not your fault.
there's nothing you could have done, right? However, now you're in a bind. What's your bind? You came out of the city limits into the city on Shabbos, right? You're not allowed to leave the airports.
Really?
You cannot leave the airport. If you land on Shabbos, you're stuck in the airport for Shabbos. Avram Fried famously landed basically right by Shabbos, and he had to spend Shabbos in the airports.
What if you can walk
Did he
to
write
a,
about
like
it?
a place from the
He spoke
airport?
about it. Yeah, so I know what.
What if you're walking distance somewhere from the airport?
Once, according to the rules of Tchum Shabbos boundaries, if you came from out of the boundaries, means from 3,000 feet out of the city limits, you have no right to go beyond your 6 feet, your build, in this case, the building that you're in. So you could stay in the airport, or you cannot leave the airport.
What if the airport kicks you out, closes?
Okay, so you don't have a choice, and then you stand right outside for the rest of Shabbos, and you're standing on the sidewalk for Shabbos, But hope.
And this happened once in El Al. They got diverted to Greece. This almost happened.
Well, Chabad put them up. That was they saved them.
Chabad put them up.
They didn't land on Shabbos, so they landed very close to
Yeah,
Shabbos.
that's what I was about to say.
Sometimes you go, what happens with
It almost
something happened and they landed on Shabbos. So then you're stuck in the airport. This has happened. Okay. Now we're moving on to a new category called Muktzeh. Now, Muktzeh has a lot of confusion, so I'm going to talk about Muktzeh. If you want, in the back, we're on page 42, but in the back, there's a in-depth analysis on page 299 of Muktzeh, okay? So first I'm going to talk about Muktzeh means, the word Muktzeh, you ask, M-U-K-T-Z, it means set apart. It is designated or set apart, okay? So what is Muktzeh and what's the reason for Muktzeh? So the reason for Muktzeh, there's given 3 common reasons for the issue of Muktzeh. 1, the rabbi said, Muktzeh is rabbinic. I want to say this clearly. There's biblical, which the 39 laws are biblical. Muktzeh is rabbinic. Rabbis are like this. If Hashem says on Shabbos, the daber dover, you can't talk regular work on speech on Shabbos. On Shabbos, can't talk business, can't talk politics, can't talk sports. What you talk about during the week, you don't talk about on Shabbos. On Shabbos, you talk about Torah, mitzvahs, Hashem. That's what you talk about on Shabbos. Daber dover, you have to talk different speech on Shabbos. You can't talk on Shabbos the way you talk on a weekday. And then it says, rugga, you can't walk on Shabbos the way you walk on a weekday. How do you walk on a weekday? Maybe you run, right? Maybe you're jogging. On Shabbos, you have to walk. You can't run. The only time you can run on Shabbos, you can run to shul. But you can't run on Shabbos. You have to walk. Shabbos, we're benachat, we're calm, we're tranquil. So they said, of course, then a person also can't act the way they act during the weekday, which means if during the week we're allowed to move everything and move around things, we can't let a person touch and move everything they do during the weekday. Especially because if a person's allowed to move everything on Shabbos the same way on the weekday, A, they might forget it's Shabbos, and B, they might put off for Shabbos the work that's permissible on Shabbos. So imagine on Shabbos, you're allowed to, unpack your moving boxes. So you'll say, okay, I'll move the boxes in on Friday. Now I'll unpack on Shabbos. They said, nope, that's Muktzeh. Can't do that. You can't start schlepping your couch to and fro and setting up your room. We don't want you to do that on Shabbos. We want Shabbos to be designated as a different day. Point 1. Point 2, they said some things that a person uses on Shabbos as a fence, we don't want you to use them because maybe, or move them, touch them because maybe you're going to come to use them. An example, we don't want you to move a pencil or a pen because you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. So the rabbi said, we're going to make a fence. not only can you write on Shabbos, you can't use a utensil whose primary focus is to do something that's not in the Shabbos, against Shabbos. So you can't move a pen on Shabbos. Muktzeh, we will not allow you to move a pen on Shabbos as a fence, so you shouldn't come to use it on Shabbos. That would be another reason for the laws of Muktzeh. But not always is it because something that's permissible, prohibited. It's because we want to distinguish Shabbos as a different day. Okay? Again, so we want to, most importantly, establish Shabbos as a different day. That's the words of the Rambam. You can see it over here, brought down on page 299. My mom says that. And two, it's a fence for those things that are prohibited use on Shabbos. We don't want you to touch them, so God forbid you shouldn't come to use them. Okay? And therefore, because of that, there's different types of muktzeh. Muktzeh means things that are set apart that we are not allowed to touch on Shabbos. And we're going to go through them here. Hopefully we'll get clarity. If we follow along, it shouldn't be that complicated. Okay? The most common type of muktzeh that most people know, welcome, Yos. The most common type of muktzeh, we're on page 300 if you want. We're jumping the laws of muktzeh right now, perfect timing, is most common is kli shemalachta le'isser, page 300, a vessel that is made for prohibited use. What does it mean, a vessel that is made, page 300, 300, for prohibited use? So, in example, a hammer. You can't nail on Shabbos. You can't build on Shabbos, right? A grater. What about a pot? Can't cook on Shabbos. So, that would be something that would be prohibited on Shabbos. What about anything that's electric? That's very common for us, right? An electric, touching your phone. Can't use your phone on Shabbos. So, the phone becomes muktzeh. Money. Can't do business on Shabbos. So money is muktzeh.
You can't serve from a pot.
Oh, good. So if the rule is like this, these are things that are called kli shemalachta le'isser. They're vessels that are their main use is isser, not allowed, forbidden on Shabbos. Most of the muktzeh we know, like our pen. Let's use our example of our pen. A pen is forbidden to be used on Shabbos, and therefore muktzeh, do not touch it or move it because it's prohibited use on Shabbos. Okay. There's two strong exceptions to this rule. Very important. One, if you need the space where that muktzeh is, you can move it. So if you left on your Shabbos table before Shabbos and Shabbos enters, and your kids left pens there, you can move it because you need a place of the table. So you pick it up, you put it away, and that's it. You couldn't do that. You're allowed to move muktzeh if you need a space where the muktzeh is. You could move it. Or two, if you need the muktzeh for itself. So Sarah was going to ask, whatever, do you have a pot? Pots are made to cook. You say, no, I don't want this week. I need this pot, so I'm going to serve my rice in the pots. No problem. Because now you're using it for kosher permissible use on Shabbos, and that's fine. Not a problem at all. In fact, if it's a vessel that you use to serve, it never really was prohibited because it has a dual purpose. It has a permissible purpose and a non-permissible purpose. The permissible purpose means it would never even became muktzeh on Shabbos. So if you generally use it to serve, it's not a problem. If you've never used it to serve, but this week you want to use it to serve, that would also be allowed because even though it's a vessel that's generally used for prohibited items on Shabbos, you're using it for a permissible item and you need it for that. So that would be allowed. So let's use it, right? If you have a hammer and you want the common example is you want to crack your nuts with a hammer, fine. Crack your nuts with a hammer. You're allowed to, even though the hammer is prohibited use, you could use it for something permissible. Electric items are very complicated because most electric items you're not going to use. I'm trying to think of an example if anyone has an electric item for not its purpose. I mean, you could take your phone, with your phone, you're going to smash nuts. You could do that, but I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like a smart thing to do.
You can crack your nuts with a hammer.
On Shabbos. I wouldn't try it at home, but in theory, you could. We have to.
Because
So
I feel like I've been in the park and people are like, I can't eat pistachios because it's Shabbos.
this is another issue. Good question. There's a side issue of
I
nuts
love
on Shabbos.
Shabbos.
There's a side issue of Shabbos and nuts that the Alter Rebbe says you shouldn't have nuts on Shabbos because the issue of sifting, you're going to sift through the good and the bad and separate the good nut from the bad shells. So therefore, some people don't have nuts. So unless you want to crack open your coconut, you could use a hammer to crack open your coconut on Shabbos. That would be allowed, even though it's a vessel that's prohibited general use. But if the item itself, you're not allowed to touch it. No reason to touch it. Why am I touching it? That's one category. Two, and this is an almost more complicated category, is what happens if something, a vessel that is not a vessel, it doesn't have a vessel. What would that be? What's not a vessel? Dirt, peels, rocks, leaves. Could you touch those things? So the general answer is no. To go to the park and start playing with leaves or rocks is not allowed.
Because I fidget with grass and people are like, stop.
Because
It's
grass has
Shabbos.
another problem. You're great. You bring up is because you might rip the grass from the ground. And if you rip the grass, now you've detached it from its source.
Do you
And
know how
that
much
is-
I learned? Saturday in the park. No one's with me. I think it was 4th of July. Please, where are my friends? Where's the crowd?
Everyone here's your friend, but they just don't know the song. But so touching rocks or things that are not vessels, and what's the issue? So over there we said you never plan on using these things on Shabbos. You never plan. Now, if you have designated rocks in your house, if you have a nice rock on your house, you have a diamond on your finger, keep it there. Don't worry about it. All right, don't get rid of it. But we're talking about rocks. In other words, things that you never even dreamed you would use, and they're not vessels, they're not things that humans use. So you can't touch them on Shabbos. We want to make a distinction of what you're touching on Shabbos when you're not touching on Shabbos.
Does walking count?
You're allowed to walk on Shabbos.
No.
Yes, you go. No, on,
Walking on rocks.
yeah, that's fine.
I think you're gonna move them, but it's.
Okay, so you'll see in a second the exception to the rule. In general, the general rule. So why it's not gonna be a problem. Okay. So rocks, we said dirt, sand, but you can't play in the sand on Shabbos, by the way. If it was designated in a sandbox, you could. But if you went to the beach on Shabbos, you can't start playing with your hands with the sand. You can't start doing that. That would be because it wasn't something you intended to use on Shabbos. Now, if before Shabbos it was designated, you had designated rocks that you play with. In the old days, they used to use leaves to wipe themselves after the bathroom. So they have designated leaves. So that was a toilet paper. That's fine. Because that was designated. That was created. It was intentionality. One more example that we have to talk about Muktzeh. There's something that can become a foundation for Muktzeh. What does it mean a foundation for Muktzeh? If that table over there, let's just say, right, where our roses are, we put our Shabbos candles over there. Now, Shabbos candles, you can't move on Shabbos. It's something that's forbidden to touch because it's fire. You can't touch it. So now that table becomes a foundation for the Muktzeh, and you can't move the table.
What if you need the table?
What are we going to do? Good. So therefore, if you see in most Jewish homes on the table where they light Shabbos candles, what do? You'll see they put either challah before Shabbos, they put a siddur, they put a tehillim, they put something else. Why? Because then we say, no, that table is not support table just of candles, which is prohibited to move on Shabbos. It's supporting the challah. Challah is very important. That's what this table is for. Or this table is for my siddur or my tehillim. And therefore it becomes allowed to move the table and not a solution. And this only applies by twilight. From candlelight until dark on Friday, whatever's on the table establishes what that table is for this Shabbos, right? So if there's candles only on the table and the only thing that's there on Shabbos till dark, now that you can't move that table on Shabbos. Unless, again, you need the space. But just to move it, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Now it became Muktzeh.
Got a question.
Please.
You know, when we're in situations where people show up, it's Shabbos, our Shabbat dinner for 18 becomes Shabbat dinner for 36.
Right. That's
The
Shabbos
table's
dinner.
gonna grow.
Yeah.
We have to have Nicholas grow the table for us.
Okay, if there was candles on the table or electric on the table, or let's just use candles because it's the most common in Shabbos issue, then we couldn't move the table. But you'll notice in the house where there's candles, they're always going to put something else.
But I'm not talking about candles. I'm talking about when we open another table.
You're allowed to open the table on Shabbos. Later you'll ask me questions. It seems to be that we can't, but we are allowed to open the table on Shabbos. There's an issue of building on Shabbos. It's building up a folding table on Shabbos. The problem, the answer is not, because that's the definition. It's a folding table. It's not a permanent table. You cannot build a permanent table on Shabbos. To open a folding table or a folding chair, you are allowed to do on Shabbos. Oh, that was a very good question. Okay. Those are the synopsis laws of Muktzeh, except here's the one big exception I said we're going to mention, and we're now to say it. Muktzeh, since it's a rabbinic enactment, only applies if you do it with your hands till your wrist, right? We don't want you to move forbidden objects or the table that you're not allowed to move, or rocks with your hands. But any other part of your body is allowed. This is where this idea that people mix up is only regarding to the laws of Muktzeh, things that are not allowed to be touched. That prohibition is only not to be allowed to be touched with your hand. So you can move. Now I want to talk about your fan. What's the issue of moving a fan on Shabbos? That's why we're talking about it soon. The issue of moving a fan on Shabbos, so the fan's plugged in, it's going. You're not changing any electric by moving it. So it's an issue of Muktzeh, right? Something not to touch because it's forbidden to use it on Shabbos on your own. Okay, so then the only prohibition of that would be to use it with your hands, to move your hands. But the solution is use your elbow, use any other part of your body to move that fan, and then it would be allowed. That's what most people do. So I know those buttons that go up and down, right? So just use a different part of your body to do that, or even not the button. Just you want to move the fan, so just move it not with your hands. Any other part of your body is considered allowed to move Muktzeh. So if you, let's say, fan was a good example, right? If you want to move a Muktzeh pot, something for the sake of the Muktzeh thing, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. If you need a space, just pick it up and move it. If you need to use it for something, you're allowed to use it and pick it up and move it, use it. What happens if you want to use it for like the fan example? So then you have to do it with a different part of your body. So playing in the sand on Shabbos is you can't play with your hands with sand on Shabbos. You're allowed to walk on sand, you're allowed to walk on the rocks. It's not a problem at all on Shabbos.
Literally, people are gonna tie my hands in part show.
Sarah, what's your Muktzeh story with the petting a dog? There was a petting
So
a dog.
here's the
Very
story.
good.
We were out in the street and Leia was very little and there was a dog and we were walking from J&F house to here. So I said, Leia, don't touch the dog. And the guy was like this, he thought he was Orthodox, he lived in Israel, worked on like the books. He was like, it's not Muktzeh. And Manuka, deadpan, looks at him. My father's a rabbi. It's Muktzeh. And then this grown man is like arguing with Manuka. And we're just like, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, and we walk away. I'm like, it's Muktzeh.
So animals are Muktzeh, unless it's your animal. So the guy was right. He was allowed to touch his dog, but Manuka was also right because it's not her dog.
Yeah.
She wasn't allowed to touch it. Why? Because your animals you're responsible for.
You can touch
So
the dog, but I
So
can't.
therefore, your animals you have to take care of. It's your obligation. You have to.
Okay, but
You
what
don't
if
have a
I'm at
choice.
Sky's house sitting on her couch on Shabbos and little Bouchon is like very excited that Sarah's here and like nuzzles himself on my lap?
You gotta keep it off.
No,
Why
no,
can't-
no.
why can't you touch an animal?
An animal is designated as Muktzeh because it's something that is not meant for you to use unless it's your animal. But if someone else's animal, it wasn't
But where
designated
did
for you to
dogs-
use on
I feel
Shabbos.
like that, like dogs are like.
In other words, anything that wasn't designated for you to use on Shabbos is inherently Muktzeh. So someone else's pet is Muktzeh, but not for themselves, only for somebody else. For yourself, it's allowed.
At someone's house the entire Shabbos.
Oh,
Maybe if
great
you're there
question.
pre-Shabbos,
Michelle.
probably you're allowed to touch that
What if
dog.
your dog's sitting? somebody
Probably
else's
you're allowed
dog?
to touch. Yeah, that probably becomes your dog for
If you're
Shabbos.
there by
In
Wednesday.
other words, no. If you're there before Shabbos, it probably, I assume, then means you plan to touch this dog on Shabbos, therefore it's okay. I'm going to assume that that's the rule. In other words, it became like your dog. This is your object for Shabbos. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about today. Let's read questions. Okay, there's a lot of questions. I'm sure you'll come up with from life or experience. Now we're going to talk about lighting Shabbos candles. This is what we're going to end with today.
I
Page
love
47. Okay. There is I'm going to read page 47. Does someone else want to read it, actually? My voice is heard enough.
I'll read.
Yeah, awesome.
Go for it. No,
Do you
I'm
need
not
that?
there. I'm not there yet either, so you go.
Don't worry, we're going to have you read something else. There's enough.
Chapter 3, the Shabbos candles, the laws of candlelighting. Kuna said, one who is accustomed to lighting candles on Shabbos will have sons who are Torah scholars, as the verse says, for a mitzvah is a candle and Torah is light.
Meaning if you light candles, then you're going to have the Torah's light. So if you light Shabbos candles, you'll have children who are Torah scholars.
In the merit of the mitzvahs of lighting Shabbos and Hanukkah candles, one receives the light of Torah. For being meticulous with the mitzvah of mezuzah, one merits a pleasing dwelling. For being meticulous with Kiddush, one merits winery full of fat. For Kuna frequently passed by the home of Rabbi Abin, the carpenter, and saw that he had the custom of lighting many lights in honor of Shabbos. For Kuna said, two great men will be born to this family. Rabbi Abin was born from Edi bar Abin and Rakia bar.
As you see in the brackets here, it says, you are meticulous, the Shabbos candle lighting, I will show you the lights of Tzion, will bring you Beis Hamikdash. You might know the song, right? Matem Mishamarim, Neiroi Shel Shabbos, Ani Marelochem. Sarah, no one knows my songs too. Neiroi Shel Tzion. Right? If you light the Shabbos candles, Hashem will show us the lights of Mashiach of Tzion. The mitzvah of Shabbos candles is a rabbinic mitzvah. It's one of the rabbinic mitzvahs enacted. It was not given to women specifically. So men have to listen now too. There's a mitzvah that you didn't want homes to be dark. And therefore, they said you must light candles in the room where you're going to eat. Because imagine you come to sit down at your Shabbos dinner and it's dark. What are you going to do now? Right? It's too late. You didn't turn on the light before Shabbos, which means light the candle or light the oils. So they said, we don't want to have fights in homes where it's dark and people are upset. Oh, it's your fault. You turn on the candle. You didn't light the candle. I thought you were going to be home. Oh, you never do anything anyways. Here you go. That's the end of a nice Shabbos meal. So instead, they said there's a mitzvah to light Shabbos candles. It's more peaceful. It's more tranquil. And primarily, it should be in the room where you eat. It doesn't have to be on the table, but in the Shabbos candles, mitzvah is the room where you eat. Now, that is the mitzvah for everyone, men and women. The principal mitzvah was given to women that they should bring light to the world. And therefore, yes, if in a married couple, the woman will light the candles on behalf of the couple, although a lot of people have the tradition, you see here on page 50, the husband therefore should at least set up the candles because he really has a mitzvah too, so at least he should prepare the candles. But the woman will be the main one to light the candles as it brings light to the world. If there's no woman, so of course the man should light. It's a mitzvah. It should be light in the house. Okay? Now, once whoever lights candles, they've accepted Shabbos, even if it's early. And therefore, once a woman lights candles, even if it's early, like the 18 minutes before sunset, where we're supposed to light candles, now Shabbos is already started. For the other family members who have not lit Shabbos candles, Shabbos hasn't started. If whoever lit Shabbos candles, Shabbos has begun. Because of that, there's a famous nuanced detail. And normally, when we're about to do a mitzvah, we're about to eat the food or we're about to put on tefillin, we make the bracha, and then we do the action item. On Shabbos, candle lighting, we do the action item, and then we light the we light the candles, and then we make the bracha. Why? Since once you light candles, it's Shabbos. If the woman's going to make the bracha, maybe once she made the bracha, she's accepted Shabbos. Once you accept Shabbos, you can't light your candles. So therefore they say, no, light the candles, and then say the blessing over the candles. And that's why the tradition goes to cover the eyes when you make the bracha, not as much to focus, which is a nice thing, but also to say there's no light. And then now when I finish the bracha, now I've brought the light into the world. Now we've brought the Shabbos light into the world. We uncover our eyes after. Okay. Fine. That's a general rule.
Like guys, when they light, they make sure to make the bracha before they're lighting, because they're not accepting Shabbos.
Okay, so you'll see over here it says, a man who lights the Shabbos candles has not accepted upon himself the sanctity of Shabbos, but some maintain that he should first recite the bracha and only light the candles, like you said. That would be on page 51. Some people do hold like Shmuel said, that amount would be different. How many candles? So famously, women light 2 Shabbos candles, once for Shomer and Zachar, even though everyone says, oh, for the husband and wife, it's not really the basis of 2. Or the basis of 2 is because it says you should keep Shabbos and remember Shabbos. So to keep Shabbos, remember Shabbos, you light 2 candles. Some people have the tradition that they do light for every member of the family. So let's say my mother does that. My mother-in-law light the light for the husband, the wife, and then each child who's born thereafter, they add a candle. It's a beautiful thing. Recently, I saw a woman who passed away, and they were writing that she would light not only for her children, but every one of her grandchildren. She lit also a Shabbos candle. The only thing is, the more you light, which is beautiful, you should try not to go down. Don't just say, oh, this week, I'm going to light for all my friends. The next week, I'm just going to just do back to 2. It's ideally whatever number you choose, especially if you're lighting on behalf of, your family. So what, next week you're not lighting on behalf of your family, it becomes weird. You shouldn't do that. So if you're in adding, you should continuously add every week. Okay, you have to make sure the Shabbos candles don't go out. Now,
30 minutes, right?
that's Hanukkah candles.
Okay.
Shabbos candles really should actually, good point, really should last till at least during the meal. Because the whole point is it should be light during the Shabbos meal. So if they go out 30 minutes later, actually they didn't last too long. They didn't really bring you light when you needed your Shabbos meal. So at least through Kiddush and Hamaitzi is when they ideally should last. That's why the people use tea lights could go for a few hours.
Quick question. My tradition, and I might be wrong, and I might have to change this. I usually light and I leave the house and I come here.
That's beautiful.
But I'm not with that light when I'm
Okay.
eating my meal. I'm eating
Two
my
things.
meal
First of
here.
all, this is technically, make sure you put them in a safe place.
It's in the kitchen, yeah.
Right, fine. Just saying, please, light Shabbos candles in safe places. For some reason, women are intelligent enough and they do this. When it comes to men lighting Hanukkah candles, fires are burning and the whole house is coming down. I don't know, they didn't get the memo to put it in a safe place. Also, we're coming up to Hanukkah, put it in a safe place, right? Fire is dangerous. And, keep it safe. Don't be silly. But the other thing is, okay, so we're going to get now to the good segue to the laws of a guest. If you're a guest in someone else's home, ideally, if you're eating at someone else's home, but you're sleeping in your own house, you could light the candles in your own house. The answer, you could. If you're sleeping in your own house, if you're sleeping and eating in someone else's house, so then you should ideally light it in their house, right? Now, either you could ask them to light a candle, or you could ask them if you could participate in their candles and give them a little money and participate in their candles. You have that choice as well.
Did you do that with your parents, with your mom?
And you're not going to light when you're home, you're saying?
Yeah.
I guess you could ask your mom, you say, you lighting for me too? And she'll say yes. But I don't know. That's a good question if you have to even say anything. Once you're married, you light your own, even if you go home. Yeah, okay. They bring a note here, though, that if you're lighting candles at home and eating out, you should burn the candles longer, so that they should try to see if you get bigger candles, so they'll also be lit when you come back home. You should have some benefit. You also have the choice of just having benefit from them right after you light them, and then you find you had benefit from the candles. But during candle lighting is a very, very powerful time. And like we said, if you light candles, you'll be meritorious for children who are go lose the way of Torah. That's where the prayer that people sing or say, right? The Zakini. That's what I'm not going to sing because everyone's going to, but it's a beautiful song. Come on. The Zakini, the God, may I be meritorious to raise children and grandchildren who are going the ways of Torah, true men of truth and holiness, devoted to Hashem, illuminate the world, the Torah, good deeds, and worship of Hashem. Beautiful tefillah that people say, or you could say your own words. You don't have to say these specific words, but the point is it's a powerful time to light Shabbos candles. When do we light Shabbos candles? So in outside of Yerushalayim, 18 minutes before sunset, because there's a mitzvah to add to Shabbos. I'll tell you for Shabbos. You can't start Shabbos and minute Shabbos is supposed to start. You have to add to Shabbos. So how are we going to add to Shabbos? We start 18 minutes early and calculate. And even if you wait all the way till the last minute, though, they've already built into the calendar at least an extra minute or so for called Tosfos Shabbos. But
Like those late Shabbos when people start Shabbos early.
Yeah.
Like, is there too early to start Shabbos?
the answer is actually yes. You could start Shabbos 2.25 hours before sunset is the earliest you could start Shois Zmanius is really the earliest you could start Shabbos. Now, those people who are in like Alaska, where they're never sure, what gets dark at 1 a.m., so they sometimes have a heter, a leniency to bring in Shabbos when the closest large Jewish community brings in Shabbos. So, but you can't, Vancouver, British Columbia, probably. But like in Russia, I think in Moscow, or places in northern Russia also, Shabbos starts very late. Or in Finland, I think some of these places, Shabbos starts very, very late.
You said 18 minutes outside of Yerushalayim.
So in Yerushalayim, a lot of people have accepted the Kabbalah, they start 40 minutes before. Why? Because Yerushalayim is surrounded by mountains. So some people say that once the sun goes below those mountains, really you should start Shabbos. So that would be 40 minutes before. Some people say no, even just because it's behind the mountain, it's not really sunset. But most people in Yerushalayim have accepted Shabbos 40 minutes before. That's why there's in Yerushalayim you'll hear the Shabbos alarm pretty early.
Shabbos alarm.
Yeah, Shabbos
That should be a
alarm
goal
is
for
every
Manhattan.
To the siren.
exactly. We have one in Greenwich. Yeah, Shabbos alarm is at about 15 minutes before Shabbos. The alarm goes off. It says Shabbos is coming, and then like 2 minutes before candlelight, it goes again. In Yerushalayim, when I was there in living in Geula, they play music for like an hour before Shabbos songs, and then they do the alarm. So there's no way of forgetting that Shabbos is coming. According to halacha, you're supposed to announce that Shabbos is coming. The times of the mission, they would blow trumpets 3 different times on Friday to let people know, close your shops, put your hot food on the hot plates, and light Shabbos candles. So
Where's the Shabbos alarm sound nice?
it's based on Montgomery and on the top of the show of Montgomery and Kingston.
You don't hear it?
No, even by the way, I was 4 blocks away at Chaya's house. If the doors closed, you have to pay attention.